disadvantage, and we should build on it.
So one more point on the perception from the outside, we being a democracy, rule of law, etc. We spoke just now. You also touched upon in a very minor manner, but it's something that is very high context right now. That India's image of being respectful towards its minorities as important for it being perceived as a desirable trading partner and investment destination. I want to qualify this, that this actually did not matter to the world in its dealings with China, but nevertheless, in the context of the recent disturbances on the news flow, if you may have seen across different Indian cities, how serious do you see this as a factor? Given that we are emerging as the next big consumption center, can we afford to just wing it?
Well, first, I would dispute the fact that China has been able to get away. The treatment of the Uyghur population, to some extent, the treatment of the Tibetan population, is much more front and center. And when you behave badly towards your minorities, it does send a very, very different picture of you to not just consumers across the world, but also to governments about whether you would be a reliable partner, whether they actually want to help you. I mean, think about the image that Ukraine has. Why is so much help going to Ukraine today? A lot of it has to do with the way Zelensky plays out in the democracies of the world as a brave fighter for democracy. And forget the reality of Ukraine before this, right? The corruption, the authoritarianism within Ukraine itself in the past and so on. But now it is seen as somebody that democracies around the world, not just the West, but places like Japan, Korea, want to associate with. So there is a public perception which is very important. Again, where India starts with an advantage, but it is ours to lose. And this is where, to some extent, I think we have to be very, very careful. As you know, in the UK, for example, Infosys got into a little bit of trouble. Partly that was political, but because it was continuing to do business in Russia, and there was a lot of furor, especially over the chancellor and his wife and so on with Infosys. But these things get picked up, and these things get broadcast widely. And the public perception, there's much more of a sense in the public that we can punish corporations that don't behave the way we want. And so that has to be navigated carefully. If we are seen as a democracy, treating all our citizens respectfully, and a relatively poor country, we become much more sympathetic. I am buying this stuff from this country which is trying to do the right thing, and therefore our markets grow. On the other hand, this is a country which is siding with the authoritarians. This is a country that oppresses its minorities. And you read about this every day in many ways. It's not just the New York Times or the Economist, a whole bunch of people. And then you hear this is a country that is suppressing data on how many deaths happened, just like the other authoritarian countries. It all adds up to an image which we can well do without. We may be angry about how this image takes place, but it's the facts of the world.
I think we're running short of time, but I have two very, very important questions coming from one of your papers that I found very, very interesting. Two points here. You spoke about the evolution of our democratic design and quote two broad reasons that affect the same. You said that the constitution makers credited the executive excessively with good intent, with relatively few checks on its power over citizens. The second point that you said was the constitution recognized the power of decentralization, but stopped at the state level. The result today is an exceedingly centralized administrative system, unable to deliver the goods at a very specific citizen service level for a population of 140 crores. You spoke about the pathetic state of services to the ordinary citizens, quoting specifically the state of our education and healthcare systems. This obviously should not be happening in a democracy, but it's happening. So there is a design problem there. So what do you think can be an innovative solution to mitigate this current structure? Now, we have got the constitution. It's going to be, a very, very big task to try and now rewrite that and restructure it. So we'll have to work our way around it. So what is it that can be done to mitigate this centralization, which probably is not working to the real, user of these services in a democracy, which shouldn't be happening? Is there a case for more states, as in breaking down existing states to more states of smaller sizes? Would that help?
Well, first, I think the framers of the Constitution were in a difficult position that they didn't want to impinge on the elected representatives too much, in part because their own position was not that as legitimate. They weren't, they didn't come into the Constituent Assembly through a widespread election, a free and fair election. So in that sense, I think they wanted to be a little careful. The point I think is important, however, is that the Constitution has been flexible and has changed with the needs of the time. And I think importantly in that flexibility has been the fact that we have strengthened constitutional authorities over time. I mean, remember the Election Commission was a farce before T.N. Seshan actually gave it teeth. And that made our elections much, much better. And so, one, we should certainly strengthen constitutional authorities, and the undermining of constitutional authorities like the Election Commission, but like the Enforcement Directorate or CBI or other such institutions, tends to essentially erode the democratic principle. We can do all that within the Constitution. The Constitution also, talks about decentralization. Now, think about the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has about 230 million people. I'm probably getting the number a little wrong, but that's about 2/3 the size of the United States. The United States has 50 states, and Uttar Pradesh is one state. And of course, you could take each of our districts. But what happens is the administration it's not like the district collector is like an independent governor of a US state. They're not elected. They don't respond necessarily to the will of the people locally. So my sense is that we could do a lot more on decentralizing functions, funds, and functionaries to the local area. Roll out Panchayati Raj in a more effective way. Now, part of the problem here is not so much the center. Of course, we keep talking about center-state relationships, but a lot of states resist the decentralization from their state capital to the local region, especially when it comes to funds and it comes to functions. A lot is retained at the center. So I think that if we wanted to make a significant change, it would be let's focus on pushing more power to the locality, because that would allow the seat of governance to move closer to the people. The people would have more of an ability to affect it. And the seat of power would also see what is happening locally and take decisions which are much more local-centric.
So that brings me to the last question, and I think the most important question is, I thought it to be. You've discussed the individual versus group identities and how that